I think it's fair to say that the Peavey 5150's legacy has morphed since its release in the early 90s. Designed by James Brown in conjunction with Eddie Van Halen, obviously, the Peavey 5150 is synonymous, I suppose, at least in the beginning, with that kind of mental, amazing 80s high voltage rock that makes you feel like you need to go out and buy a massive wig to be able to play it properly. Something vaguely like this. And then obviously with heavy, thick, heady doses of this. But I think what the Peavey 5150 in modern day, nowadays, is synonymous with most is this. Yeah, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. I think in terms of the metal amp Mount Rushmore, as it were, this amp certainly owns its place. Across the front of the amp, you've got a 3-band EQ shared between 2 channels, crunch and lead. The crunch and lead channels both have independent gains and independent master volumes. And then you've got an effects loop around the back, along with your usual ohmage selectors across 4, 8 and 16. In terms of tech specs, inside you're going to find 5 12AX7s, presumably 4 for the pre and then 1 phase inverter, and that's going to be passing into 4 6L6s for your power stage, putting out 120 watts. Just in case you want to make everybody at the back of the room deaf and everybody brave enough to stand at the front look like Jeremy Clarkson testing the aerial atom. There's a real sense of history and of legacy when you plug into a Peavey 5150, in the same way that you feel all warm and fuzzy when you plug into a vintage Marshall or to a really old Bassman that's absolutely dimed. You just get this feeling that you're connecting with this thing that kicked off a movement, it kicked off a revolution, it kick-started a whole genre of music that all of us, I think, probably are so passionate about. believe, on the Soldano SLO 100, at least on the circuit. I think James Brown and Eddie kind of, by the looks of it, allegedly will have used that as kind of a starting point and jumped off from there. But I mean, what a fantastic starting point. There is absolutely nothing wrong with starting from an SLO 100. I mean, the only issue with the SLO 100, I think, for most people is, yes, okay, it might not float your boat tonally if you're looking for a certain thing, but, in terms of broad strokes, the SLO 100 is a spectacular piece of kit. I think the only real boundary in terms of, why doesn't everyone have an SLO 100 then, is the fact that they're £3,000 or however much they are in dollars. Sorry, I'm not 100% sure. Whereas the 5150 covers a lot of that stuff off for a lot less money. Yes, it's big and angry and abrasive, and it gets kind of muddy if you turn the bass up, past 5, and it's scooped a lot of the time, and there's so much gain, and it's just unbelievably cacophonously, earth-shakingly loud. But that's the whole point. That's what it is, that's what it's for. You don't go out and buy a Lamborghini Aventador to pop to Sainsbury's. You buy it to scream around a track and eventually, inevitably, flip it upside down. So far, we've been hearing the 5150 through my aux box, running a Marshall 412 packed with G1275s. The 5150 nowadays, though, is synonymous really with two things, and that is a Celestion Vintage 30 and a tube screamer. The argument could be made that you could go out and buy a 6505 or indeed one of the EVH models for, maybe less money, maybe the same amount of money if you're looking at an EVH. But I think that completely misses the point of these things. If you grew up in the 80s or you grew up in the 90s, sorry for the plane. If you grew up in the 80s or you grew up in the 90s, there's you grew up watching these guys on stage with 5150s. You grew up watching your heroes with 5150s. You grew up with posters on your wall of these guys, these incredible genre-defining, boundary-pushing guitar players with their Peavey 5150s. And that means that no matter how much more affordable the Peavey 6505 is or the EVH model is, that if you grew up looking at those posters and thinking, wow, then when you get your hands on a proper 5150, where it's a block letter or a signature, whatever floats your boat, you plug into it and there's this sense of connection, and the inspiration that comes from that is enormous. It's massive. And even today, you've got amazing modern guitar players like Keith Marrow and Rabir Massad and Matt Heffey from Trivium. The list of people who have used a 5150 is ridiculous. It's everybody from obviously Eddie Van Halen to Trivium to Motorhead to, you name it, really. At some point they've plugged into a 5150. And the inspiration that comes out of that is enormous. I started looking for a Peavey 5150 initially because Keith Merrow was getting some unbelievable tones out of his 5150. It later came to light, obviously, that that's just Keith Merrow being Keith Merrow rather than the 5150. But I mean, I think it's definitely the 50. It sounds phenomenal. It really, really does. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. If you like this video, please do like and subscribe and share and do all the YouTubey things. They really, really do help us out. My New Year's resolution this year is to stick with this and to make more things, because doing this is so much fun. I really want to try and build a community of people like me who just love sound and audio and generally making cacophonous, deafening noise. We're going to be looking at guitar amps, we're going to be looking at pedals, we're going to be looking at synthesizers and plugins and everything that makes noise under the sun. Really, it's going to be a blast. Please subscribe and come along. I'll see you in the next one.